Roll for Crit is made possible thanks to the support of viewers like you and our patrons on our Patreon page.
You can become a patron for just $1 a month at patreon.com/rollforcrit.
Welcome to this Roll for Crit preview of Uprising, Curse of the Last Emperor, a game that's on Kickstarter only for a few more days. So if you like what you see here, make sure you check out that page right away. Now, this is a cooperative 4X game. Because of some unfortunate dark rituals and some poor choices on the Emperor's part, there isn't much viable land left, and you'll be playing as factions trying to overthrow not only the Emperor, but also the horrors of the Chaos Horde. This is as I said, a cooperative 4X game. So in order for you to win, not only will you need to work with your allies, but everyone will need to get a higher total score than both the Empire and the Chaos Horde by the end of the game.
Each player is going to have 8 action points that they can spend on their turn, and you will take turns in player order, taking one action at a time. Some of those actions will end your turn after you've taken it, while some of them will allow you to take an additional action afterwards, but you'll still need to spend that action point to make use of it. On the board, each player will have their unique hero, as well as some units. Before each round, you're going to have the chance to build some of your units at one of your havens. They will have different resource costs, so depending on how many resources you have available or what you're going for that round, if you want a bunch of weaker units or a couple of stronger units, you'll have different options available for you to take on the enemy with. Of course, you can move your hero around the board. To do so, you spend an action point, and you can move that hero to one adjacent hex. Now, some of those hexes will have white borders. Those represent mountains, and most units cannot cross those, but heroes are able to move right on top of them. If you're in the same hex as another hero, then you can trade resources or items with them. The move and trade are the two actions that don't end your turn, so you can do those in advance of the other things you want to get done. At the start of the game, most of the hexes on the board will be unexplored. When you get to a new one, you can take the explore action in order to flip it over. Once you've done that, you will see some effects at the bottom. Commonly, you'll be receiving some resources. These could be food, plunder, or salt, which you'll be using for a variety of things, or it could have some special effects. Another action is to build one of your havens. It costs 3 plunder, and you place one of your haven pieces from your personal player board and put it on that space. You can only do this if that space is vacant, there are no enemy tokens there, and once you have done so, you'll be able to build out from that haven new units in future rounds. This will also score you points, and it will open up your board to give you more resources during the production phase in future rounds of the game. Over on one side of the board, you'll find the market. Here you can purchase brand new items. These are cards that have a range of special abilities. Some of them you'll be able to use in combat. Some of them you'll be able to use in specific other situations, and they may or may not be better for certain heroes, or depending on what your play style is. You will exchange a number of resources depending on what they say, and you get to take that item right away. Some of them are one-time use, and some of them will remain in play. There will also be a set of quest cards on the board. These are like little side quests that you can take on to gain various rewards. Each of your heroes will have a set of hero dice, different stats, and each of those dice come in different colors according to the different stats, whatever they are proficient in. So you're going to get those colors of dice and the specific numbers listed and roll them once you've decided to attempt one of those quest cards. You're trying to get certain symbols. So it might tell you that you need a certain number of skulls or a certain number of shields, and if you meet at least one of those requirements, then you succeed at the quest and you'll get the rewards listed below that requirement. You could qualify for more than one of those requirements if you have enough dice and you have a lucky roll, which means you could get multiple rewards. Finally, I'm going to talk about the command action. This is an action you can take to move your units. With the traditional move action, you can only move your hero. With the command action, you're commanding your troops, you tell your units to move into an adjacent hex, and it can be up to 5 units from any surrounding hex into one new hex. The primary reason that you're going to be doing this is probably to start combat with an enemy faction.
This wouldn't be a 4X game without you killing off some troops and hopefully exterminating your opponents. You have a hero with dice, as stated earlier in the quest section, but they technically do not take part in the combat. However, depending on their abilities, the items you've bought for them, or some other effects, it may be worthwhile them to be around the area of combat to give you some bonuses. There are buildings and different monsters and bosses, but everything comes down to those same dice. As you can see from this dice chart here, they come in different colors, and they mostly contain one of the following symbols. There's blanks, which are blanks, skulls, which are hits and usually kills one unit. Almost everything has one life. There are shields, which block one skull, and there are lightning bolts, which usually are used to trigger effects depending on who rolls them. The other big thing you need to take into account is the land you're on. Depending on what kind of land, such as a forest, for example, it could affect the outcome of the combat, which means you'll have to be careful where you pick your battles. Now, when combat actually starts, there's going to be 2 combat phases. First, there's the range phase. Some units will have a bow and arrow symbol by their picture, and that means they take part in this phase. If they are in that phase, you gather dice for that, and you roll them. Think of it as the first volley of arrows, if you will. And that could kill off troops before you even hit the next phase. Maybe nothing happens. That second phase, however, is the melee phase. This is everything with a sword, and I think if I recall correctly, everything has that, so you don't have to worry too much. It's just that's when everything goes down. In that phase, you're going to roll the dice once again, compare the results. Every skull, as I said before, will take off a unit on the opposing team. Shields will block them, and you keep going until one side is gone. The only exception to the health rule is the Legion and Horde cards, pretty much the elite units of the enemy factions you're up against. You can see here there is a whole variety of them. They each have their own big placard. And when you look at them, depending on the health they're at, they actually have different dice. So while you're fighting them, the more damage you do to them, the weaker they become. So that's something to take advantage of. Now, if you're able to kill them, they have rewards on the bottom, which may spawn more enemies. Maybe it does something else. And that, of course, will help you get points. If your units die, they go into whichever graveyard of the enemy that they're fighting with, and they gain points there at the end of the round. So you want to be a little bit careful. There are ways to maybe get things out of their graveyard before their scoring round, and that actually is going to be a really big core mechanic of this game, is really trying to manipulate the board to prevent them from getting too many points. And maybe sometimes try to trick them into fighting themselves, because they're not allies. They hate each other just as much as you hate them.
Yeah, they're the alien and predator of this universe, and you really want to stamp both of them out to be safe. This is a really unique game. You know, it is, I guess, essentially in a lot of ways, as we said, a 4X game, but because of course it's cooperative, and the fact that there are 2 units, 2 complete factions that are controlled not by any player, but by the AI, so to speak, of the game. And again, they can fight each other. They're gaining their own points. It gives it a very unique feel, as well as, you know, the unique things that each faction has. Each hero has their own specialties, their own different sets of dice. So players are encouraged, I think, to work together in different ways, and to you're kind of managing different parts of the board. In some ways, it's almost like a 4X game with a little bit of that pandemic style board control thing, because if too many of those curses, for example, fill up, that's a problem. So you are really on the lookout and trying to keep the numbers of those enemy units down.
And of course, those enemies know that you exist, so they're going to be going for your outposts as well, which are really important because they help you get resources at the start of each turn. So you really want to defend them. And what's cool is unlike the enemies, which are pretty much NPCs that have their own following record, you have a lot of weird combos you can pull off. A really awesome example was I sacrificed a strong unit, but because of one of the event cards without these Druid cards, I was able to summon it back before a scoring phase, in essence blocking a whole bunch of enemy damage for losing no units. So you can do some really fun, crazy combos when you set them up right.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, a lot of it is dice rolling when it comes to the combat, but naturally you're going to have cards in hand as well as items that you buy that will allow you to affect those dice and change them or add more dice to help improve the odds of your roll. There are also some cards that are more cooperative in the sense that you might be able to help players out during their combat. Normally you can't do that. You can't like team up. It's just as soon as your units move into one area, they're all fighting it out, and that's it. And I like that aspect of the combat, too, the fact that it's not like you can have your guy move into another space and I don't want to fight yet. Like, let's wait it out. No, this game is it's fast and furious, and if you're going in there, you're fighting to the death. And you also don't want to wait around too long, because if you just let these enemies wander around the board, they're dropping their stuff here and there, and they're gaining more points that way. So you really have to be on the offensive. You got to be aggressive. You can't just sit back and wait. So pretty much every turn, you're going to be doing something. You're going to be getting in there and trying to get something done, which is exciting and makes it feel eventful, I think, from turn to turn.
There is also solid progression throughout the game. For example, the item cards can either have those strong one-time effects, but some of them will be permanent upgrades to either combat or maybe give your hero more dice to roll when they complete quests, which is fantastic at times because sometimes you need those extra little bit to get those other rewards. There's also some real interesting takes on the exploring, because when you flip the tiles, those white jagged borders, which are only passable for your hero, no other units, you can rotate the tile to however you want it to be placed, meaning there's going to be a bit of, all right, where do I want this border? Because if I put it here, I'm forcing maybe the enemy troops to have to go around there, which is easier to position my troops. Because maybe you want them on a certain land territory, because let's say you don't have a lot of ranged troops. You want to maybe fight in the forest or in mountains, which limit the range dice. So that way you're not going to be hurt as much during that first battle phase.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that aspect of it, and then also deciding, is this a good place for me to build my haven? And of course, you want to be doing that pretty much every turn, because you want to be gaining points and getting more and more resources each round as the game goes on. So I also like that aspect of feeling like, in regards to the progression, you're probably going to have more resources each round, and you're going to feel more powerful. You're going to have more places where you can build units from, as your havens are more widespread. So as the game goes on, you'll have more options, and of course more items and new quest cards coming out. And you might say, oh, like that quest card's better for that player because they have these colors of dice, so you should attempt that. Or maybe this one's not as strong right now because a certain enemy's not out. So there are a lot of different variables that are at play. We just got to play a little bit with, as you can see, the tabletop simulator version of the game, not the final one. There's still plenty of different Legion and Horde cards and other items and things that we haven't had the chance to try out for ourselves. But it definitely seems like there's a range of challenges that you could experience in this one.
There are, of course, expansions too, which will add either more groups and heroes and stuff. And I do want to warn you that not only is this, like I said in the beginning, the Kickstarter is ending in a few days, but this does seem to be planned to be a Kickstarter exclusive game, so they don't plan to bring this out to retail. So if you really want to try this out, now would probably be the time to get it.
Now is definitely the time. So we will have a link in the description down below. You can click it and you can try it for yourself if you have the time. But in the last couple days of the campaign, you can go on Tabletop Simulator, and it's all right there. You can take a look through the rules and everything, play with the pieces virtually, and see what you think. And let us know what you think in the comments. Tell us what you like about Uprising, or if you are planning on backing it. And until next time, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this was a Roll for Crit Kickstarter preview.
Catch the latest from Roll for Crit by liking and subscribing and supporting us on Patreon.
You're not a hidden traitor, are you? Come on, like us.